In this slideshow, we're going to talk about how England developed from a weak and divided state in the 1400s into a strong and unified state in the 1600s that is ready to embark on worldwide colonial ventures. So England got off to a slow start. While the Portuguese and the Spanish are busy sending out voyages of exploration about to discover the New World, England is fighting a long and bloody civil war known as the War of the Roses. And this drags on for a long time and prevents England from developing itself and looking outward to the world in the way that Spain and Portugal are. That's a picture of the Civil War there. But at the end of the Civil War, a series of strong rulers emerge, and these guys help to lead England to its future as a colonial power. And the first guy in the House of Tudor, who is the ruling house that emerges from the Civil War, is Henry VII. And Henry VII does a number of things, but most importantly, he begins to establish a powerful navy. And he finances the first English voyages of exploration, sending John Cabot to explore the northeastern coast of North America. Is Henry VIII, who is one of the most interesting rulers that I know of. So one thing that's interesting about Henry is that he plays an important part in this thing called the Protestant Reformation. So during the medieval period, Europe was united under a single form of Christianity known as Catholicism. And in Catholicism, basically everybody listened to this one guy who was called the Pope. But during the Protestant Reformation, various people split off from the Catholic Church and say that they want to worship God differently than the Pope says they should. Guys like Martin Luther and Ulrich Zwingli down in Germany and Switzerland start things off. But before long, Henry VIII gets on board with this and says that he wants to do Christianity his way. And so Henry's reason for leaving the Catholic Church is rather personal. And it's that he is trying to have a son, right? Every king wants a son who can be his heir. And he gets married and he has one wife for a while. And this wife does not bear him any children. And so he talks to the Pope and he gets a divorce, which is a big deal in Catholicism. And he gets remarried. And he is with this wife for a while and he has a child, but it turns out to be a daughter. And Henry really wants a son. He decides it's his wife's fault. So he tries to get divorced from his wife as well. The Pope says that's a no-go. One divorce is okay, 2 divorces is too many. And in response to this, Henry decides that he's just going to leave the Catholic Church. So Henry tells the Pope to go away, and he founds his own church known as the Church of England, where he is the head religious authority. And then he grants himself a divorce and proceeds to get married and get divorced several more times. Eventually he does have a son, but whatever. Anyway, in the Church of England, basically they do everything the same as the Catholics did, but instead of having to listen to the Pope, who lives in Italy, they now listen to the King or Queen of England. But so, another thing that Henry does is he establishes a strong state. When he breaks from Catholicism, he confiscates all of the property that the church had, including some of the best land in England, and then he either sells it or adds it to his own property, which makes the king even more powerful than he was before. And there are really very few checks on his power. He can basically execute whoever he wants to, and he uses this right very frequently, often beheading people who had one time been his friend. And finally, he has the power to persecute people who think differently than him in religious matters. So Catholics who remain loyal to the Pope, and also other people who think that Christianity should be done differently than the Church of England does it, face intense persecution by the king. So Henry VIII did have a son eventually, But his name was Edward. He ended up being kind of a weakling, and he died at a young age. And then after that, there was some turmoil. But eventually, his daughter, Elizabeth I, emerged as Queen of England in 1558. And she was a very powerful and intelligent ruler. And she leads England into what some people call a golden age. And so first what she does is she begins to expand English power outward. Using the powerful navy that her grandfather, Henry VII, had begun building, she starts preying upon the Spanish fleet. And so remember, the Spanish are paying for their empire in the New World by mining a bunch of silver and gold. And what they do is they try to carry this silver and gold back across the Atlantic to Spain, where they can use it to pay for all sorts of stuff. So Elizabeth, taking advantage of this opportunity, begins to equip English ships and send them out as privateers, aka pirates, to capture the Spanish ships and to steal all of that gold and silver for England. And in this way, Elizabeth makes incredible profits, which then she can use to build more ships and to strengthen England. Another thing that she does during this time period is she okays the first colonial attempts by England, where they found settlements in the New World. So the first settlement is up in Canada, in Newfoundland, in 1583, and that doesn't really work out very well. It fails rather quickly. And the second attempt, it happens actually on an island off the coast of North Carolina called Roanoke. And this is in 1585, led by Sir Walter Raleigh, who has lent his name to the state capital of North Carolina. But this colony also fails, mysteriously vanishing a few years after its founding. After this, the colonial efforts have to be sidelined because Philip II, the King of Spain, declares war on England. And he does this for a couple reasons. First of all, the fact that England has been attacking Spanish ships for years makes him rather unhappy. But Philip also is a staunch Catholic and believes that all Christians should have to listen to the Pope in Rome. And for this reason, he believes that England, who has broken from the Catholic faith, needs to be conquered and returned forcefully to Catholicism. And for these two reasons, Philip assembles the Spanish Armada, which he believed to be invincible. It was a fleet of hundreds of enormous ships called galleons that he sent north out of Spain to attack England. But the English, using their own ships, managed to defeat the Spanish Armada in a crushing defeat. And Spain's navy after this is forever crippled. This results in England having naval dominance in the Atlantic, which remains the case for a long time. It also marks the beginning of Spanish decline. So even though the Spanish have this huge empire over in the New World, they have lost their navy and they're going to grow weaker and weaker as time goes on, whereas the English are going to grow stronger and stronger. So after the war with Spain, England undergoes a sort of golden age, and a couple of big changes happen that make England especially ready to begin colonizing North America. The first is that there is a big boom in population. Because of changes in agriculture and other advances, more people are being born, fewer people are dying, and they're all crowding into cities because there's not that much land available. Also, changes in the way people farm are kicking a lot of small farmers off the land. And this is leading to a whole class of people who are landless and poor who kind of wander from city to city. These guys would be first picks for voyages to the New World because they didn't have anywhere else to go. Another English rule that's very important is the law of primogeniture. And this is where the first son always inherits all of his father's property. This means that the second and third sons and so on have to seek their fortunes elsewhere. This leads to a whole class of educated gentlemen who are willing to go over to the New World in order to find land of their own. And finally, there's still a lot of religious dissent and persecution going on in Elizabethan England. So even though Henry split from the Catholic Church 50 years ago, there's still a lot of disagreement. And the Catholics still think that England should be loyal to Rome. And there are these other folks called the Puritans, who we'll talk more about later, who believe that Henry VIII didn't go far enough, and that more bigger changes are required for Christianity to become the religion that it really ought to be. And so all of this persecution generates an even larger population of people who are willing to leave England when the New World colonies are finally established a little bit later. Anyway, all of these things are strong motives for emigration, which will help England to populate North America when it begins to establish colonies soon after this. Terms that I want you guys to look at. These will be on your important terms list, and these questions we will talk about tomorrow in class, so go ahead and read over them and think about what you might say in response to them. That's all. See you guys.